138 openings of wisdom, reading meditation, opening 11. 138 is the numerical value of 138 is Kos Eliyahu, the cup of Elijah, and it's also the numerical value of the word Semach, which means branch. And Kos Eliyahu, the cup of Elijah, in ordinal Hebrew gematria has a numerical value of 66, which equals Ben David in regular Hebrew gematria. And now we continue along with the opening. Opening 11, the images of prophecy derive from Malchut, and only through the lens of Malchut can we understand what is above it and what is below it. The ability of the Sephirot to be represented in the images and likenesses of prophecy derives from the Sephirah of Malchut, which means kingdom, which is the root of the lower realms. It is through Malchut that they are all made in the form in which they are made. Accordingly, the Kabbalistic sages said, "It is impossible to ascend or receive except through Malchut." Even the very forms of the images themselves provide knowledge of the wisdom with which the worlds are governed, for through them we can know how the Shekhinah, God's indwelling presence, needs to govern for the sake of the matter represented in a given image, and to bring it down to the level of the lower realms. From and through Malchut, it is possible to gain knowledge of the levels above it, these being the actual powers and attributes of God's government, the Sephirot themselves, as opposed to the images through which these powers and attributes appear when seen in the lens of Malchut. Following our discussion of prophetic likenesses and images, we will now explain the benefit they provide. The proposition consists of two parts. Part 1, the ability of the Sephirot. This explains where the images of prophecy are rooted. Part 2, even the very images and likenesses themselves. This explains the benefit we gain from them. Part 1, the ability of the Sephirot to be represented in the images and likenesses of prophecy derives from the Sephirah of Malchut. For each Sephirah has its own particular unique power, and that unique power influences all the other Sephirot. The ability to represent the other Sephirot through the images and likenesses of prophecy is the unique power of Malchut, which is the root of the lower realms. And for this reason, the beginning of form and likeness is found on the level of Malchut, which contains the very root of form and likeness. Accordingly, Malchut itself appears in the prophetic vision as the general category of a likeness or image. Malchut also acts as a lens or looking glass, which shows the other Sephirot in the form of images or likenesses, because they can all be apprehended only through Malchut. It is through Malchut that all are made in the form in which they are made. This means that only through Malchut can they be revealed and seen. And this is the reason why they all appear in the way they do in the prophetic vision. Malchut is like a lens or mirror in which the form in which the objects standing before it descends upon its own intrinsic fitness and quality as a lens or mirror, polished, clear, or unpolished, blurred, etc. Accordingly, the Kabbalistic sages said, "It is impossible to ascend or receive except through Malchut." This indicates that it is impossible to gain any perception of the higher realms except in this way. Part 2. Even the very forms of the images themselves, it is not enough to understand the attribute revealed through and represented by a given prophetic image. It is also necessary to understand why it is that the attribute in question has to be represented by this image in particular, provide knowledge of the wisdom with which the worlds are governed. For Malchut is the root of the lower realms, and it is necessary to understand the various ways in which it is connected with them and how they are rooted in it. Afterwards, when you see the lights, meaning the upper Sephirot, as depicted in these images, you will then understand how any particular light must be drawn down into the lower worlds precisely in this guise as a result of the unique qualities inherent in Malchut. For example, the prophetic image of the lion represents Chesed, or Abba. If you understand what a lion is by contemplating the form of a lion in the lower world, you will then understand why Chesed must be channeled by the indwelling presence into the lower worlds precisely in this manner. And this is why the earthly lion, which emerges from Malchut, is made in this form. For through them we may know how the Shekhinah, God's indwelling presence, needs to govern for the sake of the matter represented in a given image. Through understanding the images of prophecy in general, how the form of the creatures in the lower worlds is bound up with Malchut and its unique qualities, we can know how the levels and powers of Malchut are bound together to produce this thing. And to bring it down to the level of the lower realms, Malchut's power to depict things through images stands in the middle, between the flow of spiritual sustenance from the higher Sephirot and the receiving of that sustenance by the lower worlds on their own intrinsic level. Up above the sustaining powers, the higher Sephirot are simple. However, when they descend in order to send the spiritual sustenance into the lower worlds, the Shekhinah must forge a bond of connection between the two. This is done by translating the simple light of the higher Sephirot into a form in which it can be received in the lower worlds through various contractions, and the light can then go forth in this manner to its place in the lower worlds. From and through Malchut, it is possible to gain knowledge of the levels above it, these being the actual powers and attributes of God's government, as opposed to the images through which these powers and attributes appear when seen through the lens of Malchut. This is quite obvious because the prophetic visions derive from Malchut, and through Malchut it is possible to gain an understanding of the powers with which God governs the world and their rules of operation.